I use the Hardy Nutritionals product Daily Essential Nutrients, which I have been on for the last 15 years at full loading dosage. My life before I discovered DEN was, I say that I didn't have a life. I say that I existed. I felt like I was a walking dead person, a zombie. My health and thus my life were completely out of control. I say that I was 90% my health issue and 10% me, and now I say I'm 5 or 10% my health issue and 90% me. It was like my health issue had completely overtaken my personality and my behaviour, so it actually became me. The little core me was still just tiny there, but that's how I feel. All I can really do is list my symptoms. I do have low-grade chronic depression. That's what I was diagnosed with, or dysthymia is a fancy word, and I was diagnosed by a GP. And so from the ages of 28, I lost my job, and I believe that's when my health issue, my depression was triggered. And because I lost the structure of going to work. So from the ages of 28 to virtually 38, and then a couple of years later was when I discovered the DEN and I changed my diet. I hid in the house for about 10 years. I went out for basics and, for walks, but often people would come to the door and I'd hide behind the curtain pretend I wasn't home, and I'd get the phone and pull it out of the jack point and not answer the phone. But I wasn't like that every day. I just want to make that clear. But in general, that was what I was like. So I had physical symptoms as well as mental health symptoms. So I was constantly in a state of exhaustion. Whenever I walked, my feet would go thud, thud, thud because I was so tired. I would lean on the hand basin or the sink when I was doing the dishes. And if I went to the supermarket, I'd be leaning on the trolley because I was so tired. I had the flu, like constantly had the flu or a cold, or I felt like if I got over the flu, I was like 2 steps away from getting it again. I had a terrible cough, like I was always coughing all the time. I was like, my stress levels were through the roof. Like I used to, I shouldn't laugh because it's not funny, but I used to yell and scream at people. Like my ex-partner who has schizophrenia, and that's pretty serious. He called me a spinner, and that's from someone who has schizophrenia. And yeah, I was pretty aggressive, particularly when I had my monthly, and before my monthly, a lot of screaming. My mind would race, like just race all the time, where now it doesn't race, and I would blurt things out because, as I said, I couldn't control my mind, so I just blurt everything out that would come, and that doesn't go down particularly well with your friends sometimes. And I'd wave my arms around all the time like this because I was so stressed, but I was a nervous wreck. And I had brain fog, particularly when I had my monthly. I would have brain fog for 5 days where I just couldn't think straight. One of my worst symptoms, besides the racy mind, was actually lying on the bed in a trance. And then when I had my monthly, I would actually lie on the bed for 5 days. I wouldn't lie on the bed. I would be tucked up in the bed for 5 days. And except for having a shower and eating, I would be in bed for 5 days because I was so physically and mentally drained. It was like someone had a vacuum cleaner and just sucked all the energy out of my brain and my mind. Because I wasn't on medications, I didn't tend to sleep. So I was just living with all of my symptoms. So when I was trying to get to sleep at night, I'd be lying on the bed in a trance, and of course I hadn't had dinner, and then I couldn't get to sleep. So the only way I could get to sleep was I'd get up and have something to eat, and then I'd go back to sleep, and then I'd have to get up and have something to eat and then go back to sleep, and I was doing this all through the night. And then I'd be worn out in the morning because I probably had 2, 4, 6 hours sleep. So lack of sleep, of course, was a constant problem because I'd be really tired. And then that led into another symptom, which was the fact that I could only read a couple of sentences, and then I'd be so tired because I couldn't focus. so I couldn't concentrate. I was very, very muddled and confused. For example, if a friend and I had gone to the to the mall, and we'd come out to the mall, and when I had to remember where was the car parked, just blank, absolutely no memory of where the car was parked at all. And then I'd get street names and that really muddled and confused, and lose things, car keys. I mean, that's all quite normal, is that people do misplace car keys and things, Everyone's got a touch of forgetfulness, but mine was just like constant all the time. But I just want to say, having low-grade depression is an absolute nightmare, and that's low-grade. So it was like my health issue. Every second of the day, all I thought about was my health issue. And I remember my mum saying to me one time, "Kim, can't you ever think about anything other than your depression?" And I sort of was like, well, no, because I feel it there every second of the day. It would be like saying to someone who's got cancer, "Do you think about anything other than cancer?" And I know that you shouldn't. You should think about other things. But when you have that physical and mental drain and you feel it all the time, I did expect great results because of all the reading that I had done. But it wasn't the placebo effect when I did start on it, because I was sceptical about whether DEN would work or not, because when I was watching these DVDs of people from overseas with schizophrenia and bipolar who were curing their health issues using intensive vitamin and mineral supplements, because, as I said, they were from overseas, I couldn't relate to it. It was just too out of my mind to, because I'm here in New Zealand. And I also, because I was suffering from some paranoia, I thought these people could be acting. But the more reading and research I did on DEN, as well as just general research about the link between food and mood, and food and mental health issues, and intensive vitamin and mineral supplementation, the more fascinated I was with the subject, and the more that I knew there was something to this. My life now that I've been taking DEN is... this is more that I think where I really notice is with my mind, that the fact that it doesn't race, I don't have those symptoms anymore. I do, of course, get a little bit stressed, and that I'm not going to make out I'm 100% perfect, but I always say to myself, for goodness sake, Kim, at least you're not anything like what you were. I've got to look at it that way. And the two examples that I really use is obviously, first off, a complete flip in my mental and physical health. But the two examples that I use is the fact that I can drive a car. I bought my first car 2.5 years ago, and I got my license when I was 18, so that was 35 years. I hadn't driven a car for 35 years. As I said before, there's no way I'd be capable of driving a car. I wouldn't have been able to focus. I would not have been able to cope with the stress of driving a car. There would have been lots of accidents. Wouldn't have been good. And the fact that I went to university 5 years ago when I was 50. This is somebody who used to lie there at night and go, "I've got to put the rubbish bin out tomorrow. I've got to put the rubbish bin out tomorrow." Because I was so stressed, I knew the next day about all I could do is cope, was putting the rubbish bin in. I'd have the dishes 3 days worth sitting there, or I'd put the washing out, and it was 3 days until I could actually bring it in, because I just couldn't do it. So obviously I bring the washing in and out and do the dishes when they should be done. And so to go back to the fact that I was like that with the rubbish bin, and that I could cope with the stress of going to university, was just incredible. There was one time when I did stop taking daily essential nutrients, and it was about 8 years ago, and so I'd been on DEN for about 7 years, and I thought, oh, I'm feeling great, I can stop it because I'm so well. And obviously I wasn't well, but I was so well compared to what I was like before, and I was fine for the first 2 weeks. And then my monthly came, and I went strange and confused and really depressed again, and that actually was good in some ways, because it made me really believe how I needed these nutrients to function physically and mentally. And it just, it gave me a really big scare as well, a shock, as I just said, really, to know how much I did need the nutrients. DEN has helped with my relationships. The best example I can give of that is obviously just generally is that I can communicate with people so much easier, because my mind is working so much better now. It was my nephew. Tom is nearly 20 now, but for the first 11 years of his life I didn't see him because I felt I was too much of a weirdo to be around him. And I love him dearly, and it's just been the last 8 or 9 years when I've got to know him. And it was funny because about a year ago, because Tom didn't see me with my depression, with a really bad depression, and I told Tom about that I had depression. He goes, "No, you're normal." And I says, "Oh, am I?" And I think sometimes I don't feel kind of normal. You know, sometimes you sort of think, "Oh God, I'm a bit slow or a bit confused, or I feel a bit stressed or something." But it's nothing like what it was. And for someone to say you're normal is just incredible. So that's a big example. But something else I wanted to mention too was when I was at church about 5 years ago, and they were talking about welcoming more people with mental health issues into the church, which was really, really nice. And then afterwards I said to the lady, "I have mental health issues." And she said, "No, you don't." And I said, "Yes, I do." And she said, "No, you don't." And I thought, oh, okay. Well, she seems to think I don't, so I can't change her mind. So that was quite strange. I mean, it wasn't strange, but it's always good when people do talk like that. If I had to recommend Den to a friend of mine, I would tell them it's the most researched vitamin and mineral supplement in the world. It's been published in over 30 medical journals, top medical journals, and studied at 9 universities around the world. And it has been chelated, which means attached to an amino acid, which just means big language, makes it more bioavailable to your body. It's in a particular balance designed for bipolar. And when you have vitamins and minerals, they need to be in a particular balance for them to be most effective. It's broad spectrum, which means it has a range of 36 vitamins and minerals, so you have the synergy effect. And the more vitamins and minerals and amino acids or anything that you have in the synergy effect, the better it's going to work. And as I said, it was specifically designed for bipolar. The downsides of using Den, well, there haven't been for me any other than what I said before about we can get it on the disability allowance here in New Zealand, but that's more of a financial reason. That's not really a downside with anything to do with the supplement, but that just needs to be because it needs to be more readily available financially, like the medications perhaps it will be one day. But no, anti-aging, there's upsides. I'm sure that it slowed down my aging process, but that could be my healthy lifestyle as well. There are no downsides. I've had 15 years of being on this supplement, plus the year and a half before that when I changed my diet. So I felt like I've had all of that time to actually go from being really unwell to having my health. You know, I started to drink all the water and eat all the fruits and vegetables. So I'm just tying the diet back in, is that you need to have a really healthy diet, be holistic. You just don't take pills and eat a rubbishy diet. So I feel like I've been on an amazing journey understanding the link, and not sleeping, having exercise, doing all those things, because all those things obviously can trigger it. And now, of course, with all the new information coming up about the gut flora link, you know, the brain-gut link, is really fascinating. I'm 55 now, but I want to spend the next 50 or 40 odd years, the rest of my life, talking about nutrition and inspiring other people and letting them know there is hope, you know, because, well, there is, as long as you can educate yourself. And I was lucky in that I was very determined to help myself. I think that's another thing. If you don't want to help yourself, well, there's not much there's not much hope. But I was determined to help myself.
And you've written a book.
Yeah, it's a small book, Health, Healing and Hope, and I wrote that 9 years ago, and that's about what I just said, my amazing journey about finding the real meaning of health, and that if you give your body the raw materials from what is made, it's actually called orthomolecular psychiatry or nutritional psychiatry. If you give your body the raw materials from which it is made, it actually has the amazing ability to heal itself. So I just look at the fact that I had a massive deficiency, and for unknown genetic or metabolic reasons, I wasn't getting enough from my diet and needed more than the average person. And I do talk about myself in the book and quite a bit about my ex-partner Will with the schizophrenia, but I talk a lot about nutrition in the bigger picture, because I think even back then, 9 years ago when I wrote it, I could see the bigger picture. But the fact that I was well enough to write the book was just quite an accomplishment in the first place.